Welcome to Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Property managers are real estate heroes. They're the glue that makes your investments stick together. And on a personal note, we're going to learn about it with my best friend. It's the long-awaited return of Get Rich Education's own John Collins, today on Get Rich Education. Countless property investors get killed with maintenance costs, but that's far less likely when you buy brand new construction. Let me tell you about JWB Real Estate Capital in Jacksonville, Florida. They pioneered the build-to-rent model where you can invest in new construction, turnkey rental properties. That's why JWB was featured on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. To learn more and see inventory, go to newconstructionturnkey.com. Finally, Total Control Financial gives you checkbook control of your 401k and IRA money to invest in real estate. It's time to get your retirement money into your own checking account, but you've got to avoid the little-known tax that you'll pay with any self-directed IRA. Instead, it's time for the QRP. Learn more and get your free copy of the QRP book by text messaging QRP in all capital letters to 72,000.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Welcome to Get Rich Education, episode 248. You are back for that weekly slice of abundance. This is where financially free beats debt free. On the past few episodes, we've been talking about some of the worst situations conceivable for real estate investors: recession, depression, loss of real estate value, loss of rent income, ending up in foreclosure, and today we're talking about property management nightmares. Now, we're not always so gloomy here. In fact, real estate investing has made more ordinary people wealthy than anything else, but problems and how you deal with them are where so many great lessons come from, and you're going to get a lot of those today. One way to understand real estate is learning it from the inside out. Managing tenants is really dealing with the inside, the guts, and the operations. Today's guest, Get Rich Education's own John Collins, has been serving on a consulting role over the past several months on an $18 million real estate project in the Dallas-Fort Worth metro. He's come alongside the owner-operator of the project to help her administer the property management and find other efficiencies in the operations. You'll see today that why these management problems are particularly nasty is that they have inherited largely unscreened tenants from the previous owner. Let's talk to John. I'd like to welcome back onto the show my best friend, Get Rich Education's own business developer, John Collins. He was last here with us nearly 3 years ago on episode 106 when he talked about how he just walked away from his day job that he had had for 10 years. And he really didn't have much of a plan after he left his day job. I've actually wanted to have him back here on the mic sooner. John is more of a backstage guy, where I'm more front stage. He is an extremely bright, productive guy. You've heard him on a number of other prominent shows, including the Real Estate Guys radio show. He's attended a number of high-level international events like Joe Polish's Genius Network. He's consulted numerous businesses and people about growth, collaboration, and entrepreneurship. He's a great connector of people, and he's made a number of important connections for me personally. The dude is just a high performer. Right next to me here in the same room in Anchorage today. Welcome back to the show. You're now on the front stage. Get Rich Education's own John Collins.
Hey, Keith. Great to be back. Thanks for having me on the show. And, congratulations on, coming up on 5 years here doing this. That's amazing, man. Like, what a journey it's been.
You're right. That is an astounding anniversary. It's remarkable to think of where the time went. But one place where your time has been going is you've spent a number of the past few months working on a new build project in suburban Fort Worth, 159 single-family homes, all contiguous, that were all built within the last year. So tell us about the marketing and the management and what you're doing for that project.
I had a great opportunity come up here last fall to work side by side on a large acquisition in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And gosh, this just kind of came out of left field. So I went with it, and what a ton of learning it's been. Got a lot of up close and personal looks at property management from the inside out, and got involved in this project midstream of the acquisition phase. And then we actually took over management of it, and we've been building a property management team from scratch and simultaneously stabilizing the property as well, like this large commercial 159 unit project.
Now, what's interesting is although the properties are relatively new, you inherited a number of tenants from the prior management. So we've got basically about a B plus property here, but a lot of the tenants in it are C plus. So really your job then so much is to not see that the units are upgraded, but to be sure that the tenant quality is upgraded from where it is.
Yeah, for sure. This was a very interesting project, very different challenges that I've encountered previously. This was, basically a new build that we took over from the builder who was not a property manager. So this place was pre-populated with just anyone who could basically sign a lease agreement and get into it. No credit checks, no background checks, things of that nature. So we've inherited a tenant base that is Cclass at best. 30% of them don't pay or don't even pay on time. All sorts of issues there that we kind of inherited. So in addition to, taking over the property, now we have like this large cleanup to do in terms of the resident base to help this property and this asset perform at the level it's capable of performing at.
So did those existing tenants that you inherited even have written leases?
Some of them did, most of them did, but the previous property management team, they were very scrappy at best. They didn't have any sort of system, really. It was all paper and pen. Some of the leases were non-existent. Some of them were outdated. We took over the rent roll, trying to verify who was actually in the property, the number of tenants, how many pets they had, what their rent was, if they had a security deposit, what that security deposit was. Pretty much every detail that you could think of was loosely guarded and managed.
I often joke that the discipline is called property management, but it really ought to be called tenant management because that's where the stress comes in, and dealing with tenants can make you lose faith in humanity. And I know you kind of had this top 10 list of mayhem that you had to deal with, really more tenant-induced mayhem than it is from the property. So tell us about some of those struggles as you're trying to upgrade the tenant from maybe a Class C tenant to a Class B tenant.
Yeah, this was such an eye-opener. This is like the stuff you can only hear about or read about. But until you actually experience it, until you're in the office when these folks walk in and present their case, or when you actually walk a property, walk the unit, and experience some of these challenges, it's just almost like makes you stop dead in your tracks. So I've really come to see the real estate superheroes are really property managers. Fortunately, we have a great team in place. They work very hard. They're very dedicated. And we absolutely would not be able to have success without them. But I did actually put together a top 10 property mayhem list. And I don't know if you want to go through that or just pick out a couple of these.
Let's go through that. On your list, there is arson, the Jerry Springer Show by 2 residents in the leasing office. The third one is domestic violence reported, condensation, kids smoking in dark corners behind someone's house, an unwanted boyfriend that wouldn't leave. Then you have pets and pests, an abandoned car, syringes found in a home, and finally, daylight coming through baseboard inside one of the units. So start off with arson. Was there the threat of arson? Is that the quality of some of the tenants that you're dealing with here across these 159 single-family homes?
This is true real-life stuff. Like every single one of those items you mentioned actually happened. Like arson, yeah. This is like a big deal. This is a major safety issue. We had some adolescents that started a fire behind one of the units, actually caught it on fire. And luckily, one of the adjacent neighbors, like the parent, noticed it and they called 911. We got the fire department out there. We put it out. Thankfully, there wasn't any injuries and there was minimal property damage done. But it was a true fire. We had to document a police report and a fire report. And now later this summer, we're actually going to have a community-wide safety event where the fire engines come on site and we talk about fire safety and talk about all the things related to safety within the community that they're managing. And that's just like a reality. I didn't think this stuff actually happened, but it did.
That's incredible. And that's got to affect your mindset and your psyche of you and the management team there at the properties. It would probably be even worse if it were an apartment building, because that way a fire can spread into more units. But yeah, I mean, that is just never a good thing. And before we go on, what is the size of each of these 159 homes, just approximately?
This actually ties into one of your previous episodes. I think maybe 2 or 3 episodes ago, you talked about nationwide how these single family home communities are popping up. This is a great example of that. So this is like
Right.
It's considered a multifamily community, but it's actually 159 single family detached homes on 6 separate properties that are all adjacent. They're all contiguous. And these homes are all cookie cutter. They're about 1,200 square feet, 3 bedroom, 2 bath. There's 2 different floor plans, but overall it's like very vanilla, very basic ranch style, just really cookie cutter, bread and butter type of work class housing.
Now, you do have a leasing office there on premises for a project that's this large. What happened with the Jerry Springer show by 2 residents inside the leasing office?
We had an issue with some of the parking. We do not have assigned parking in the property. And folks were having a debate, ongoing debate actually, about who was parking where and who's was supposed to be parking where and who was parking too close to them and all sorts of things. And this was like ongoing. We had multiple, like 2, 3, 4 times. They had like, reported something to the office. And then one day they both showed up in the office and they started arguing about it and pointing fingers. And there was like emotions were just running rampant and like violent almost. And we actually had to ask them to, exit. And we just, as a team, we had to have like a little meeting about that and discuss, okay, how are we going to manage these issues? I mean, these are real life problems that occur and we can't afford to have this happen because thankfully it didn't escalate beyond that, but it certainly could have. Again, these are just real life things that happen in people's real lives. They have conflicts that arise and you got to be prepared to deal with this stuff.
What about abandoned cars? I know that's a problem that you had here. Sometimes when you get into Class C units, it's not just as easy as you towing an abandoned car, and it's definitely the kind of thing that you want to take care of because one abandoned car, just like graffiti, begets other abandoned cars and other graffiti. That can't be tolerated. So tell us about handling abandoned cars.
Yeah, again, I mean, this is just real life stuff. So it just happens like one thing leads to the next, leads to the next. So like you're driving through the property one day and you notice this car, like everyone else's car is gone during the day while everybody's at work, and there's just one vehicle just kind of left there. And then you drive by a couple days later and it's still in the same spot. And again, the parking lot's empty and it's still there. And then you drive by again, it's like, oh, it's got a flat tire and maybe one of the windows is knocked out. And gosh, it looks like it hasn't moved since last time I drove by here. And every time you drive by, it looks like it's, less and less cared for, more and more neglected. And then you actually get out one day and you start walking around it and you look in it and you see there's been stuff abandoned inside, and pretty much you just realize all of a sudden that it's truly been abandoned and like no one's coming back for this thing. And then you start to wonder, oh, is this like, was this a stolen car that was just left here, or did somebody move out and just accidentally forget their car? So then that's when you get the license plate number and you start looking at whatever other information you can get off the vehicle and find out who it belongs to or why it's there. And then usually what happens, like what we ended up doing, you just end up calling a tow truck and tow company and they come and take it away. And that becomes a problem, a burden that we have to absorb as a property management team. Quite honestly, we'd rather be doing the fun stuff or the good stuff where you're creating a better living environment for our tenants. We're getting places leased up, bringing in more revenue, whatever it might be. But no, we have to go deal with the abandoned car, and that becomes a drain on our resources. We got to pay to have it removed, and usually there's not someone there that we can charge it to in terms of like an existing tenant or a security deposit we have on hand. So these are just like problems that you have to absorb as a property management team, and they're really kind of drag on the overall performance and quality of the product you're trying to deliver to the market.
You, as a real estate investor, don't really want to see a car parked at your rental unit during the day. You want that tenant to be off at work, earning income for you. So yeah, if a car is left behind and you see it all the time, you might get suspicious about it, and you might notice that there's an expired registration tag, and they're all signs of ways to identify an abandoned car. Talk about some of these other problems on your mayhem list, as you've called it, John.
I think one that I found quite interesting, and I'm going to have to do a little side talk on this, but I think it's really value add for the listeners. So daylight coming through the baseboard.
Right.
That is a really interesting observation when you're looking at a new construction build. So this project was like basically about a year old. And when you have daylight coming in between the foundation and the bottom of the wall, like that is not a good sign, especially when you just acquired new product, like right off the market. So there's a number of issues if we want to unpack this, but I'll just mention real quickly, like In this business, like due diligence is so critical. The power of a good quality inspection or an inspector and just paying attention to like what you're taking ownership of, the physical asset and the residents, like the paperwork, the systems, everything about it is like something that you're going to be absorbing and being accountable for. So in this case, there was just some really sloppy construction that occurred. And for some reason, the city inspector didn't catch this and a certificate of occupancy was issued. People were allowed to live here. And now we got daylight coming in through the wall. And, somehow our due diligence team missed this upon acquisition. Last week, we had grass growing inside a unit because grass from the outside came in through this hole between the foundation and the wall. Now we have to mow the grass outside as well as inside. So
get a weed eater in the living room.
Yeah, exactly. So again, this is fun sharing these sort of now after the fact. These are real life true issues that come in the deep, dark underbelly that we call property management.
Now you can laugh to keep from crying. It's fun now that it's over. What about some of those uglier tenant situations? You mentioned domestic violence has been reported and there was an unwanted boyfriend that wouldn't leave. What do you do in that case? When do you know when to intervene? How bad does it get? Talk to that.
These are all like things I had not encountered previously, so I'm just learning rapidly on the fly. When you take over a project like this, you have such a huge responsibility to your residents, to the community, to the city you're operating in, to your team, to your contractors, everyone involved. There's just so many touch points. So we try to rely really heavily on the local authorities. We work closely with the city that we're operating in. We work closely with, the other government authorities, the police, the 911, the fire department, things of that nature. So we try to, if there's something like domestic violence or something like that happening, we try to encourage our residents to reach out to the local authorities. But if and when we need to get involved, we do. Like, for instance, the unwanted boyfriend that wouldn't leave, we had reports of that to the office. So we look through our lease agreement, and we actually have a clause in there that talks about occupants that are not welcome there. They're not on the lease. They're not supposed to be there. And we actually issued a lease violation, like a formal lease violation. We posted that on the door, and we signed it and all that. So now this person can show this unwanted person, like, hey, property management's here, and they're saying you have to leave because you're not supposed to be here. So you don't leave, this is what they do. They call the police and they'll come out and take you away. So we try to use and leverage the lease agreement as much as possible because really that's like the legal framework we have to work within. And then outside of that, of course, we can bring in other authorities in the community depending on what the jurisdictions are and things of that nature. So it's very much a process driven, like all this chaos and ridiculous behavior. You really need to kind of make use of good processes and procedures and leverage your local rules and laws to your favor.
Some people think if you have new construction property, it ought to be easy and there shouldn't be too many problems. I think a great lesson we're getting here is you need a tenant to match. It's matching that tenant with that class of property. And yeah, just because something's new construction, look, you had daylight through baseboards. New construction doesn't make all your problems go away. Oftentimes, after people have moved into a new construction home, they find that there's settlement cracks because the foundation is still settling. Maybe you look out on the lawn and notice, oh, you know what? After a summer or two, the topsoil does not actually grow grass here. So some people have new construction problems. We've talked about a lot of the problems. Let's get back with some lessons and solutions here. You're listening to Get Rich Education. Our guest is Get Rich Education's own John Collins. More when we come back. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold.
Would you like to know the easiest way to create wealth and passive income with real estate? This is Marco Santarelli with Norada Real Estate Investments. Now you can access the best deals without the stress or hassle of having to find, renovate, or manage those properties. We save you time by providing you with passive income investment properties in some of the best U.S. markets. Learn more by downloading your free copy of The Ultimate Guide to Passive Real Estate Investing. There's no obligation and nothing to buy. Simply visit passiverealestateguide.com and get your free copy today. That's passiverealestateguide.com.
For a real estate investor like you seeking an income property loan, go to Ridge Lending Group, NMLS 42056. Over the years, you've heard President Chaley Ridge generously devote her time to you here on the show as a guest. Ridge provides investment property loans in most U.S. states, and you're going to find out how they've helped more people realize their dreams of real estate financial freedom than any other mortgage lender in the entire nation when you get started at ridgelendinggroup.com.
This is Rich Dad, Poor Dad author Robert Kiyosaki. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold. And the reason I respect Keith, he's a very strong, smart, bright young man.
Welcome back to Get Rich Education. We're talking with Get Rich Education's own business developer, John Collins, about real estate's superheroes, those property managers. Let's talk about some of the lessons and the solutions that you got from these problems, John. A lot of it has to do with knowing the client and then serving that market that you're in. Tell us more.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, property management, as I've learned, is really about people management.
Yeah.
And that really gets down to what is it you're really trying to accomplish in the market? Like, what need are you filling or providing or serving to the market? And then that kind of boils down to who's your client? Who's going to show up? Who's this property a good fit for? Or who are you trying to make the property fit in terms of the person out there that's got a housing problem? So that is the first and foremost. You need to be crystal clear on what's happening in the market. And also, even more importantly, where's the market going? What are the shifts you're seeing? And we've seen a lot of shifts just kind of front end on the cusp of different things in this market we're operating in, which has been very fascinating because we're trying to stay loose and nimble, adapt to the current needs, but also kind of have a feel for where we want to be in a year or two out as we think things are moving in one direction or the other. So that's critical.
So you're out there marketing the property in a lot of those conventional ways, online and elsewhere. Talk to us about screening the tenants because you're trying to replace these outgoing lesser C-class tenants with incoming B-class tenants.
Yeah, and again, this might just sound like kind of common sense, as you're listening to this show in your earbuds or whatever, but, screening the tenants, that is a critical step in the process, and it's not something you want to speed through or neglect or be sloppy about. It's something you want to sit down with your team or your property management company and make sure you understand every step in the process and make sure that screening process at the bottom of it is going to deliver a nice, warm, ready to sign a lease tenant that you want to be occupying your property. So we do a very thorough screening and we have a lot of different things that we do are kind of custom to this project specifically in this market because we want to make sure we deliver the right person to this project and make sure that it's a good fit for everybody. And one thing we found too, and this kind of goes back to just serving the market. We raised the prices a little bit after we made the acquisition.
Yeah.
And interestingly, as we raised the price, a higher quality tenant started to show up. So that just in itself, that's not even really part of the screening process. That's just a business model approach where we had a slight rent increase and all of a sudden that in itself kind of weeded out some of these other folks who was just a little bit beyond their capability. And now we have a higher class tenant who's got a little bit higher standard, a little bit higher expectation. And that makes us want to serve them a little bit better, makes us want to work a little bit harder, make the property look a little bit better, make it perform a little bit better, all that sort of thing. So it's just kind of a nice upward spiral.
So some prospective tenants saw that price, figured they couldn't afford it, didn't even apply. A higher price tends to get a better quality of tenant. And part of that has helped drive your asset performance. So tell us about, as you get a better class of tenant and as you're able to charge more rent, how that's been increasing the total valuation of the project.
Yeah, this is another great takeaway. So it's interesting. I was actually, I've been serving on this project as in a consulting role. So I get paid for my services, things of that nature. But honestly, what I enjoy most about what I do is I learn so much while I'm actually doing it. So one of the most valuable things I learned, this is a textbook kind of concept, but to see it and experience it firsthand and have it as a target that we're driving for daily as a team is the most valuable learning experience. So this is what it is. So it's just basically your simple cap rate equation. In this particular property, the business model is based on a 6% cap rate, which is pretty conservative for this type of property in this market. Basically, what that means to our team, for every $500 that we can create of additional income per month, at the end of the year, that equates to $100,000 of additional equity in the project because this is a commercial property, so it's valued on the income performance. So that simple $500 a month of additional revenue that we can squeeze out through management efficiencies, through maybe a slight rent increase, through providing more value where we can get paid a disproportionate amount for that. These are all things that roll up at the end of the year because of that 6% cap rate. We're actually forcing the appreciation just through our management practices. And this is huge. On a project this size, 159 units, I think we did the math here before the show, and that's about $3.15 additional income per unit, which is really not that much when you think about it. So that's a huge lever we have working for us within our business model. But remember, it also goes the other way too. So if you're sloppy and you lose $500 a month, that could be eroding your value as well. So you got to think about it both ways. But really, I mean, if you're doing your job, if your property management company is doing their job, they're going to be driving toward the positive end of that spectrum. And I think that's where the real value is created.
You're managing managers and you're involved in the property management itself. So you're helping improve a community, but you have an alignment of interests there because that's also driving your asset performance. So to just work through the math of that, since value equals net operating income divided by cap rate, on these 159 units, if you just get a $3 increase in NOI, that's about a $500 increase in monthly net operating income. 500 times 12 is 6,000 of annual net operating income increase divided by 0.06, since 6 is your cap rate. That is how you come up with that additional $100,000 in valuation from just a $3 average NOI increase or rent increase on each one of these 159 single-family homes. That is just remarkable. What gets measured gets improved, and I've heard you say it, what gets measured and reported improves exponentially. Tell us about that.
Yeah, again, this is a great concept that I've run across, and I try to bring this to the team. That's kind of my role, is to bring new ideas and concepts and help drive some of this performance underneath the hood of this operation. So yeah, we're really trying to focus on measuring what matters and measuring things that we can truly impact and create a valuable outcome in terms of performance. One of the first things we did when we took over the project was to implement, an online property management system, which was a huge game changer in terms of like visibility, trackability. Now we got a place that we can document stuff and we can really like leverage big data within our own project.
Because the previous managers were only using paper.
Oh yeah, I mean only paper, and they had this mindset that nobody wanted to pay online. Electronic payments would never, that's just too much work to do that. Only because simply the builder or the seller, he didn't like to do online stuff, and that's not the way he wanted to do it. So again, to start this conversation about know who your market is and know the client, absolutely critical to spend time with your clients, with your tenants, your residents, find out who they are, like what they're using, like pay attention to comments they make and how are they paying their other bills or whatever it is. The more you can kind of step in the shoes of the person you're trying to serve and have this kind of empathetic approach really helps you get inside of the customer or the client. And, it's not in a manipulative sort of way. It's really so you can truly understand what their needs are so you can serve them at a higher level and just make everything work better.
It's so easy to insult or offend a tenant. A manager can either come down too hard on a tenant and make them feel insulted, or they can come down too easy on a tenant and then management gets walked all over. And I know you've kind of conceptualized this concept of tactical empathy when you're dealing face-to-face with a tenant. Tell us about that.
This is like one of the most valuable things I've learned here, having a lot of the boots on the ground experience the last 6 months. So this idea of tactical empathy is like really displaying to the person that you're serving through verbal communication and even maybe some physical gestures that you can truly see and experience this situation from their side of the table. You understand what they're up against. You understand what they're feeling, what's important to them, what their fears are, what their concerns are. And if you can have this sort of tactical empathy approach, an ounce of this is literally will create 10 pounds of genuine rapport and trust. And this is universally applicable, right? It's not just with your residents. I mean, this is with your partner, your team, your tenants, your contractors, the neighbors, the city, whoever it is that is like a touch point for this operation. If you can have that empathetic approach and also just, remember to ask a lot of questions, like always be curious, find out what's interesting to them and ask, just question things. Like always be questioning. Like the more questions you ask, more you can kind of get a lay of the land that's not maybe visually apparent. But once you kind of conceptually and informationally, intellectually get oriented to what you're up against in terms of the circumstance, then you can really get creative and start working on a solution that you can deliver to this person or to the market. And boom, I mean, that's where the magic is created. That's like the definition of an entrepreneur, of being out there identifying problems, pain points, and then being able to deliver an elegant solution. Most of us as human beings, like we're very emotionally attached to our problems. Like we all have problems. I have problems. You have problems. The listeners have problems. We all have different problems. We're in this like swimming in this pool of like different problems, and we're constantly trying to play mix and match. Whose problem is my solution and vice versa. So if you can be like a pro at identifying and uncovering these problems and helping people get to the solution of those, like I said, there's a lot of emotion attached to these problems and pain points. And that's where there's a lot of times there's a disproportionate exchange of value that occurs because it's so painful for them, but you can literally deliver it in a really simple, easy way from where you're at and your perspective. And again, that's where the value is created, and that's what a business is. That's what an entrepreneur is. They're creating value, constantly delivering higher and greater and better value to the marketplace, to their clients, whatever it is.
Tactical empathy, your ability to recognize the perspective of a counterpart, your tenant in this case, and then verbalizing that you do indeed recognize that.
Yeah, so I think if we could just encapsulate this whole kind of conversation about the lessons learned and the lessons that are going to help address some of these problems we mentioned at the beginning. Property management is like the deep, dark underbelly of real estate investing. Like most people don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole, excuse the cliche. That is where the rubber meets the road. That's where the real value is created. That's what makes an asset perform over the long haul. And it's absolutely critical that you take this piece seriously. And if you don't want to do it yourself, get real up close and personal with your property manager, your property management company, whatever it might be. Or if you're going big time, maybe you want to create your own property management company and you want to control that piece through ownership of the company that's actually performing that service on behalf of your other assets. But really, like the drama, it never goes away. This concept of 159 units, a really good metric to think about this. This is like a real reality check for any sort of asset. Like, okay, so most people are homeowners probably. So if you're a homeowner, like it's pretty realistic that you're going to have at least one homeowner issue about once a quarter. I'm talking about your furnace goes out, you got to replace the window, the driveway needs to be sealed, the light bulbs are out, the toilet's clogged, whatever it is, like about once a quarter is pretty realistic that you're going to have some sort of property management issue with your own home. So that's like 4 times a year. Well, if you look at this project we're managing right now, it's 159 units. So 159 times 4 issues a year, that's like 636 problems. And if you divide that by 365, sorry for all the math here, but that's basically, it's almost about 2 issues per day. And if you just look at like 5 days a week where you're actually running the business, it's probably even more than 2. It's probably closer to 3 issues per day. And literally, I feel like that is a very accurate number because I've experienced that. I mean, literally, if you ride shotgun in our office, you would see that we have about 2 or 3 real life, one-time sort of issues that we have to address. And that's on top of like the day-to-day marketing, the listing, the showing, getting leases signed up, doing lease renewals, taking phone calls, paying the bills, all the normal day-to-day operational stuff. There's always 2 or 3 one-time only medium to high drama issues that come up. Another great thing I've learned here is this idea about emotion. So like a lot of these issues that come up are very emotional, right? Because we're all out there trying to live our life and someone's got a problem and that is like a chink in their day trying to, whether they're running a family, got to go to their job or whatever. So there's a lot of emotion behind these issues. And just be aware that these tenants or residents are going to show up with a lot of emotion. They're going to expect you to like take care of it instantly, and it's a big crisis and all this stuff. So a lot of our team, like the front line of our team, like they're literally like emotional support experts. And that's really their main role, is to just kind of temper some of these emotions that are coming up through the tenant base that is, a result of these issues. So being able to understand and to manage your residents or tenants' emotions, but also having good control of your own emotions, I think is absolutely critical. And that's something I've been working on personally, just having more emotional intelligence, understanding what that means, understanding the consequences for not having that. And then ideally, if you can just kind of implement practice where you don't overreact to a certain situation, like maybe something happens and is really kind of high emotions, give it 24 to 48 hours before you actually act on it, or pull your team in. A lot of times if you pull in somebody else who's not as close to the fire as you are, like they bring a little bit of clarity to that. So that's the other thing I've learned in these high emotions kind of situations. You really have to rely on emotional intelligence. And again, like that's a skill, that's a muscle. That's something you have to kind of develop and work on over time. It's like someone can't do your push-ups for you. You have to do your own. So just another little skill out there as you go on your investing career, building your portfolio, whatever. Like there's going to be times where emotions are involved. So if you can just add that little arrow to your skill quiver, I think you'll be very well served.
So many great problems, if problems can be great, and so many great solutions and lessons there. That's really interesting. You have one problem every quarter with the C+ tenants in new construction B+ single family homes, 159 of them. Well, John, you've been all over in the real estate world, from syndication to management to being an investor yourself, both nationally and internationally. Remind our audience how they can learn more about you if they want to get a hold of you.
Yeah, so I'm available via info@getricheducation.com. So I'm actively consulting now. I'm also involved in this project I just have been talking about. I'm here in Anchorage right now, managing my own property as well as working on a small acquisition. But I do have a few slots available to do some other side consulting. But I am absolutely scalable and customizable to whatever my clients need. I am definitely available and flexible. I love working one-on-one with people. I love sharing my knowledge and experience. If I can be like a fast track multiplier for anyone out there, that's what really excites me most. So I'm available. If someone wants to reach out, we can talk and see if there's a way that I can help them and find out with a customizable solution that's fit for purpose for what you're trying to accomplish. If there's a way I can help you, please reach out. I'd love to work with you.
John is skilled and experienced at making real estate businesses and other businesses boom. John Collins, it's been great having you back here on the show.
Awesome. Thanks again, Keith. It's great to be back and looking forward to the future. I really want to take the time now to congratulate you and acknowledge you on all your success. I have seen it here, firsthand, being your best friend, sitting right next to you here. But what's even more interesting is when I get out and travel around. I've traveled a lot in the last 3 years throughout the U.S., throughout Central America, been to a lot of different events, met a lot of different people. And everywhere I go, I always run into people that are like, oh, do you know Keith Weinhold? Are you from Anchorage? Like, I know this show. I meet people that are like listeners, and they're probably listening right now. And if you're out there, I think that's so great. You guys are out there listening to the show and taking action. And it's just been really fun to get out and travel around. And when I meet people randomly that I had no idea was going to be at the same event that I was at, and they've been influenced by the work you're doing and the value and the quality you're putting out there, it's really exciting for me. And it just makes me want to come back and do more of this. And I just want to just say hi to everyone out there that I've met. And thanks for introducing yourself. And thank you, Keith, for putting this together. And keep doing what you're doing. I think this is great. And I think you're doing a lot of great stuff here.
Oh, thanks so much for that, John. One way the project attracted a better tenant profile was from raising the rents. I want to point out that you can't just do that anywhere. You can't raise the rent in a stagnant economy and continue to have a strong stream of prospective tenants. It's not in every market where you can simply raise the rent and just make your problems begin to go away. To get an increase in rent, you typically need to be in a market where there's job growth and in-migration exceeding out-migration, a deep stock of qualified tenants that actually have the capacity to pay. And you certainly do have that dynamic in Dallas-Fort Worth. Now, a lot of investors are more hands-off and don't self-manage, but today's show might give you an appreciation for what your manager does for you. Oftentimes, you are the asset manager that's looking over your property managers in the various markets that you're invested in. Part of what makes your property manager's job difficult is that they're trying to serve two masters. One of them is you, and the other is the tenant. They need to keep your tenant happy without spending too much of your money and making you unhappy. Now, a case in point, from my view as an investor and being the asset manager over my property managers, well, one of my jobs each month is to review the property manager statement. It usually takes no more than 5 minutes in each market. Just recently, in one market where I have a few dozen properties, I noticed that there was an $85 charge to me to snake and clear a tenant toilet in one of the units just a few weeks earlier. Apparently, some foreign object had been clogging it. Upon seeing that on my statement, my email reply to the property manager was that, well, that's got to be the tenant's responsibility. You've got to credit me that amount back and then charge the tenant for it, because things don't just float up from the municipal water supply nearly every single time. That's the tenant's responsibility, and the manager credited back to me. But that's just one example of the type of thing to look for on your management statement. That's your role as the asset manager. It's doing things like that. Keep your property manager on their toes. Hey, I'd personally rather go around talking about more fun topics all the time, like leverage or arbitrage all day, but with just a tiny amount of minding the store that way, you and I are hopefully benefiting from those 5 simultaneous real estate profit centers. Where else am I going to get the great long-term returns that I would with leveraged cash flowing real estate tied to long-term fixed interest rate debt? Some really good material and lessons from John's experience here today. On a personal note, John is moving to Dallas. Yes, I'm losing my best friend, or at least he's not living in my hometown anymore. So it's a little sad for me. For the real estate and business opportunity that makes John come alive and thrive, he sees Dallas as a better place to live. If you want to see more of John and I together, we just shot some videos that you'll see if you subscribe to our newsletter, which you can get at getricheducation.com, or you can soon see the videos at getricheducation.tv. John also might be in Tampa, St. Petersburg, Florida with us October 10th to 12th at our Tampa real estate field trip. If you're looking to get John's help in optimizing your project or portfolio, improving your assets' performance, or you just want to reach out to him for any other reason, he's really great at one-on-ones. And like he mentioned, you can email him at info@getricheducation.com. If you think of putting his name, John Collins, in the subject line, it will reach him faster, but it will reach him either way. That's info@getricheducation.com. For John Collins, I'm Keith Weinhold, and I'll be back next week to help you build your wealth. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.